Hello, and welcome to the June 20th, 2018 edition of Shrewsbury Matters, a monthly show that presents a different perspective on the town's politics and problems. My name is John Lukach. The topics for today's show are listed on slide 1. These are some of the articles that were debated and voted on at the annual town meeting in May. So first we had one of the topics within the town budget, the total town budget, was the school budget. And the topics I want to cover today are the free full-day kindergarten, the total school spending, and underreported school spending. The second area would be the petition articles, the other petition articles, and then the third category would be what happened with my water rate petition article. So let's get right to it. Within the town budget article, we had the ongoing problems with the school budget. While the school budget was again increased for fiscal year 2019, school officials continued to complain that the annual increases were not enough to maintain school programs and staffing levels, blaming a structural deficit caused by what they call a revenue problem. They tried to argue that the growth in spending was out of their control because so much of it was contractually mandated. But this is nonsense. Who negotiates those generous salary contracts? School officials. So who could reduce the negative effect of annual salary increases on the school budget? School officials. But they would rather blame everyone else except themselves. When you remember that over 80%, as they themselves have claimed, are the result of salaries, the best way to moderate the increases in the school budget would be to moderate salary increases. And that's where negotiating better contracts would come in. So let's look at some of the details. First, school officials confirmed that they were moving ahead with a plan to have free full-day kindergarten within a few years. This is a mandate, and town officials always complain about mandates imposed on the town by federal and state agencies. But they seem not to have any problem at all with this self-imposed mandate, which when implemented will reduce a funding source in the school budget by over $1.5 million, reducing funds available for other programs. So while school officials complain that they don't have enough funds in the school budget to maintain current programs, they mandate a new program that will cause cuts in other programs that school officials say are essential. Clearly, this is fiscally irresponsible, or this could be a part of a cynical plan to force another operating budget override as soon as possible. And actually, both are probably true. The second area is that whenever school officials talk about their spending problems, they focus exclusively on the inadequacy of the school budget. They never talk about all the other sources of school funding that result in much higher school spending each year. Actual dollars spent to support the school system. But if you go to page 21 of the printed version of the school department's 2019 budget request, which is page 27 on the online version for some reason, all the funding sources are listed. And now, if you go to slide 2, this is actually a summary. I've listed, shows the major funding sources for school spending on fiscal year 2018. They are the school budget at $62 million, the special revenue funds, which together total over $12.5 million, and town expenditures on behalf of the schools, which is $21.6 million. And the total of these sources is shown as $96.569 million. Just to be complete, the components of the special revenue funds are federal, state, and private grants, state circuit breaker, school choice and other tuition, athletics, and school lunch. Together, all of those different areas add up to the special revenue funds shown on the slide. Now, school officials like to point out that the school budget is only slightly more than 50% of the entire town budget. another way of implying that the town doesn't spend enough on the schools. So, for example, in fiscal year 2018, the school budget of $62.375 million was only 52% of the $119,945,564, which was the total town budget as reported by the town, which I've shown down at the bottom of the slide. But this year, the school department was funded to the tune of $96.569 million, which is over $34 million more than the $62 million in the school budget. Thus, total school funding and thus total school spending of $96.569 million was actually over 80% of the town's total budget of $119.9 million. I've shown those percentages in the corresponding rows. So having this information paints a much different, a much better, and a much more accurate picture of the true financial state of Shrewsbury's school system. So when next time you hear a school official talk about how small a percentage the school budget is of total town budget, just bear these numbers in mind. When I pointed this out at town meeting, the response from school officials was silence. But Finance Committee member John Lukach, a strong supporter of any and all proposals to increase school spending, felt compelled to respond. He foolishly claimed that a more accurate methodology would be to exclude the $12 million in special revenue funds from the calculation of total school funding because they were not included in the total town budget. And doing this would reduce the percentage to only 70%. But that is not more accurate. If one wants to use that approach, one should add the $12 million in special revenues to the total town budget of $119 million. This would give the total of all funding available to both the town and the school system. And doing this would result in total school spending that is 75% of total town and school funds from all sources combined. So when the school system is consuming 75% of all funding available to the town and the school system, and not the 52% represented by the school budget alone, it is much harder to make the case that the school department faces a budget crisis every year. That is why the school department doesn't talk about this subject, but that is why people need to know these facts. The last item I wanted to talk about with regard to the school budget was related to the fact that people should know that that $21 million in town appropriations that the town support that the town gives to the school system every year continues to be substantially underreported. And town officials refuse to fix this problem because they want per pupil expenditures for Shrewsbury to be reported as lower than actual. Once again, they deceive the public. The next subject I want to talk about is the petition articles, and I'll be brief on the three of them. On the styrofoam ban, this was a good advocacy project or a debating topic for high school students, but it was a poor scientific study because most of its arguments were easily refuted. For example, despite what the advocates claimed, styrofoam is inert at temperatures below the point at which it starts to burn and is therefore safe for serving hot meals. Second, Shrewsbury's waste styrofoam goes to an incinerator where it is completely burned. It does not go to a landfill, as was claimed. Third, eliminating styrofoam will not stop the problems with litter on the roads and in neighborhoods and parks. Whatever materials replace styrofoam will also create litter. This is a people problem. It's not a problem with styrofoam. The effort to ban styrofoam is just another misguided crusade. What's troubling is that this article almost passed. The next petition article was on the electronic voting study group. Electronic voting at town meeting is conceptually a good idea. Residents would know how their town meeting members voted on articles, or even whether their town meeting members attended the meeting. town meeting members would be more accountable to the voters. It would also ensure accurate counts on close votes. The negatives are the costs for purchasing and maintaining the equipment, the effort to distribute and collect the equipment at each meeting, and the additional work needed in the town's clerk office to record the results of every vote. If the study group determines that the costs and the work efforts are reasonable, the town should adopt electronic voting. And the third petition article was the article to ban fluoride in our water supplies. Fortunately, the proponents of this article withdrew it, and I hope that it doesn't come up again. Almost all of the scientific evidence says, and national health services agree around the world, that fluoridation of water supplies in recommended concentrations is beneficial and safe. So what more needs to be said on this subject? So now let's get to the meat of tonight's show, which is my water rate article and what happened to it at town meeting. So let's put up the town manager's presentation. If we go to the next slide, more than half of the pages in this 16-page presentation of the town manager is fluff statistics that really have no relevance to the arguments for and against my water rate article, or the selectmen's water rates versus the rates I proposed. So in this presentation, he tried to argue for the selectmen's new rates and argue against my alternate rates. His arguments are wrong, as I will demonstrate as we go through these slides. So on page 2, if you see the quote near in the bottom half, it says that water rates are considered fair and equitable when each customer pays the costs allocated to the class, and consequently cross-class subsidies are avoided. Well, this quote is misleading because it does not include other criteria. It does not take into account, for example, the effects of another recommendation of the American Water Works Association and the Mass Department of Environmental Protection. Namely, that water rates should increase with increasing consumption levels in order to encourage water conservation. When this policy is implemented, as it is supposed to be in Shrewsbury, the result should be that the highest water consumers, regardless of class, will pay a higher share of the costs than lower consuming customers. And since the largest water consumers in Shrewsbury are almost all commercial customers, they should pay a significantly higher percentage of the costs. Since, excuse me, since the town manager's own data shows that they are not paying a higher percentage of the costs, this is proof that these largest commercial customers are being subsidized by other customers. If you want to just go back to the page 3, go to page 3. Page 3, just, some charts that, at town meeting nobody really was paying attention to. It's fluff. Go to slide 4. The same thing is true. Nobody was reading or could get anything out of these slides. Slide 5 was the same thing. Slide 6, slide 7, slide 8. Okay. Now here again, if we go to slide 8, and let me get it over here so I can read it more easily. This is what one of the issues that the town manager tried to address. It really, what does it mean? He doesn't provide any context or argue one way or the other about it. He just went right over it, and so again, another piece of fluff without much to do with the arguments he's trying to make. Now let's go to slide 9, which is where it starts to get interesting. Slide 9, I had made the point that in the 0 to 5,000 gallon range, the selectmen's new rates were going for commercial customers was substantially higher than the residential rates, and that this was unfair to commercial customers, that those small number of commercial customers who used only that much water. The difference was $2.10 for residential, $4.75 for commercial. Now, what the town manager is trying to do on this slide is he's trying to show that commercial customers of 5,000 gallons are not being unfairly billed in the selectmen's new rate structure because their percentage increase in the water bill was less than for residential customers. But note the previous bill calculation, which was $24 for residential and $40 for commercial. This former higher commercial base charge never made sense, and it was unfair to small commercial customers. The selectmen finally acknowledged this error and corrected it by making residential and commercial base charges in the new rates equal for the same size water meter. The new residential and commercial base charges are the same, so the lower dollar and percentage increase in commercial water bills corrects an error in the prior base charges. If one takes this correction into account, the increase in the commercial bill for 5,000 gallons is not just $3.75 or 9%, it is actually $19.75 or 82%. This large increase in commercial bills at this level is completely unjustified. It does not excuse the higher commercial rate on 5,000 gallons of $4.75 per thousand versus the residential rate of $2.10 per thousand. The selectmen refuse to explain these rate differences because there are no legitimate explanations. If we go to page 10, again, more general statistics, not of no significance for the arguments. Page 11, again, the same bunch of statistics, no relevance. We go to page 12. So here we go. Here, the town manager is making a poor attempt to explain the selectmen's decision to delay the enactment of new water rates for almost 4 months, from November until April. He said the reason was to review all water meters for proper operation and reporting accuracy. But the town had just spent the last 5 years and almost $2 million installing new water meters throughout the town. If all of these new meters now had to be reviewed before new rates could be enacted, how poorly managed must the installation of all those new meters have been? Very poor. How poor was the decision of the selectmen to engage a consultant to recommend new water rates before they verified that all water meters were reporting consumption accurately? Again, very poor. And after 4 months and hundreds of hours reviewing all the water meters, what did they find? What was the benefit? A measly $21,700 in additional revenue. But that wasn't the real reason for the delay. At the selectmen's November 14th meeting, they made it very clear that they were going to enact the consultant's recommended rates. It was only when I pointed out to the town manager some major problems with those rates that the selectmen decided to delay the new rates. Chief among the problems was that they would have resulted in all residential customers with quarterly consumption above 10,000 gallons having higher water bills than commercial customers at the same consumption levels. That would have upset too many residents. So the selectmen scrapped the consultant's rates and developed new rates that avoided this problem but created others. Thus, the real reason for the delay was to hide the selectmen's initial acceptance of very poor rates and to have time to develop new rates. In other words, to hide their poor management of the rate-setting process. So now let's go to page 13. This list, 24 towns where the town manager purported to say that residential rates in these towns were higher than commercial rates. Even if true, that would still mean that over 90% of the towns in Massachusetts do not have higher residential rates than commercial rates. So it would still be very unusual for towns to have higher residential than commercial rates, as Shrewsbury does. But I went to the town websites of some of these towns on the list of 24 and found that their residential rates were not all uniformly higher than commercial rates. For example, and I got these off the websites of these towns. So Northampton, its residential and commercial rates are equal at all consumption levels. So why is it on this list? Medford, the quote from the website says, rates are the same for residential and commercial uses, quote unquote. Ipswich, it has seasonal residential rates. Residential rate is lower than the commercial rate for 7 months of the year, but higher during the summer months than commercial rates. Hadley, its residential rates are less than commercial rates up to 30,000 gallons. Shrewsbury's residential rates are higher than its commercial rates starting at only 5,000 gallons. If Shrewsbury's rates became higher, residential rates became higher at 30,000 gallons, that would mean that probably 90 to 95% of all residential customers would have lower water bills or equal to commercial customers at the same consumption. North Dighton, its residential rates are also equal to their commercial rates up to 30,000 gallons. So as you can see, I mean, there's a lot of problems with this list. And it is not correct to say that these towns have rate structures where residential rates are higher than commercial rates. What these examples show is that first, the town manager exaggerated the number of towns where residential rates are higher than commercial rates. Second, he failed to show that these other towns do not start charging higher residential than commercial rates until residential consumption reaches 30,000 gallons in most cases, while Shrewsbury's higher residential rates kick in at only 5,000 gallons. And third, he failed to point out that Shrewsbury is the only town whose top two residential rates are so much higher than its top commercial rates. So the town manager presented this list to show that Shrewsbury's higher residential than commercial rates at all consumption levels are not that unusual. But a closer inspection of the rates in these other towns actually showed that Shrewsbury is unique in the degree to which it penalizes residential consumption, starting at just 5,000 gallons. Let's go to page 14. On page 14, he highlighted the rates for one of the towns in the town manager's list, and that was Sharon. Sharon recently won a water conservation award, and the implication of this slide is that it won the award because its residential rates were so much higher than its commercial rates. But I checked the news release, and it did not win the award because Sharon's residential rates are higher than its commercial rates. One of the major reasons was its unaccounted water was below 10%. Guess where Shrewsbury's is? It's way above 10%. And Sharon's difference between its top residential and commercial rate is only $8.25, but Shrewsbury's difference between its top residential and commercial rate is over $10. So even the town of Sharon does not penalize its residential customers and subsidize its commercial customers to the extent that Shrewsbury does. So the town manager's list of 24 towns and his display of the Sharon's rates, rather than support the selectmen's new rates, actually show how much Shrewsbury's rate structure is out of line with almost every other town in Massachusetts. Finally, let's look at page 15 of his presentation. The town manager indicated that the decrease in residential water bills of $150,000 to $190,000, one of the notes, the first two notes on the left side, that those decreases in residential water bills were insignificant. But these decreases would mean about a 5% reduction in the average residential water bill. I think a 5% reduction is significant. It is certainly more significant than the $21,700 in additional base charges that were realized from the town's 4-month review of water meters, which was covered on page 12 of the presentation. During town meeting, there was another troubling comment from one of the selectmen who claimed that there had been extensive discussions on water rates. But that's not true. When did they hold extensive public discussions on water rates, as Selectman LeBeau claimed. It's true that they had extensive public discussions on the new water treatment plant, the water quality, future water system revenue requirements, and unaccounted water, but they never publicly discussed why their new water rates should have such large differences between residential and commercial rates at every consumption range. And if these supposed discussions on water rates took place in private, then they violated the spirit, if not the letter, of the open meetings law. So anyway, how did the town managers and the selectmen respond to my questions on their new water rates? The answer, poorly or not at all. I have already demonstrated that the town manager has failed to explain why the selectmen insist that Shrewsbury's residential rates must be higher than commercial rates above 5,000 gallons, unlike almost every other town in Massachusetts. And the town manager's attempt to downplay the much higher commercial rates on 5,000 gallons also failed. All in all, the town manager's presentation, properly understood, actually supported my arguments for more equal residential and commercial rates and against the selectmen's rates. So now if we could just go back to my slides, slide 4. And again, just want to explain, these are the selectmen's rates. And as I stressed at town meeting, neither the town manager nor the selectmen have ever publicly explain why these differences at all consumption levels are appropriate. I asked them to explain them at town meeting, and they refused. Why the $2.60 difference from 0 to 5,000 gallons? A commercial customer gets the same product and the same service as a residential customer, so his rate should be the same. And why the higher residential than commercial rates from 5,000 to 25,000 gallons and from 25,000 to 60,000 gallons? Are these residential customers getting better product or service than commercial customers? Of course not. So the rates should not be different either. So I want to make one final point. During the discussion of my article at town meeting, one member asked if rates were likely to change again in the near future. The town manager said no, but I said they would change because the town was planning to go to monthly water bills. People should be aware of that, going to monthly water bills next year. But again, he claimed this would not be a rate change. Well, the rates had better change, because if they didn't change, we'd be paying our water bills would be 3 times as high. So anyway, people need to keep the water rate issue in mind, since it will be coming up again very soon. My time is almost up. In closing, let me say once again that the majority of town meeting members again demonstrated their poor preparation for the meeting and their servile support for almost every position recommended by town officials. That is why we need new town meeting members who are independent-minded and not closely connected to town and school officials and employees. So I hope some of you watching will decide to take out papers for town meeting next year. Thanks for watching. Goodbye until my next show. Thank you.